Hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your host, James Avramenko, and this week I am joined by the incredibly multifaceted artist, Kat Jeffery. Kat is a visual and film artist who was also a part of the Emmy-nominated The Last of Us costume team. We discussed the complexities of friendship after sobriety, leaning into the cosmetic opportunities of life, and just what Pedro Pascal smells like in real life. All this and so much more, so lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy my interview with Kat Jeffery here on Friendless. I am so friggin' excited this week. I have not spoken to my guest in, let's see if it's 2024 now, 14 years. I don't think we've spoken. I've seen you like grow from just a theater student to like crossing the country, different countries, doing all kinds of incredible stuff. I'm gonna let you speak to it though, before I get too lost in the gush. The one and only Kat Jeffery, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. Psyched to be here.
Right? So just to kind of set the stage for listeners who may not be familiar with you, who the hell are you?
Who the hell am I? I am Kat. And man,
Okay, cool. Next question. No,
next question. That's all I got. I was so bad at answering questions because I'm the one that asks everyone else questions in my life. I'm a costume designer. I'm a visual artist. I'm outdoor adventurer. I'm yeah, all the things. I don't know. I feel like I contradict myself with all the things that I am.
yeah. Well,
Um,
but that's something to be said for like, like there it's that idea of like I think artists these days will sometimes have this impulse to limit themselves, and they'll say, well,
totally.
I've just been an actor, so I'll just be an actor, and that's what I'll be for my, for my the entirety of my failed career,
Yeah.
and what I've seen you do is just like, I've heard it described before as like following the impulse, right? And like when you get an artistic impulse, it's not that you have to shape it into your art, it's that you have to follow that art, and if it goes one way, that's where you go, right? And I feel like that's what I've watched you do, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. It's hard. It's like following the impulse and like really listening about like, is this where the growth is? Or is this like making me small? Or do I need to be small to like heal myself for certain things? And like
Yeah.
having like, there's so many dimensions of like following your path that aren't what our teachers taught us, like at all, where they're like, just go and go hard and don't quit. I
Yep.
was like, well, why can't I have balance for a second? Why can't I enjoy stability? Like, it doesn't always have to be like rock bottom, poor mental health driven chaos,
Hmm.
artist binge drinking. It can also like be that and then like growth, healing, other jobs. Like, there's so many layers that need to sing at different times. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's been like such a big part of like all the decisions I've made
Yeah.
in the
I,
last little while.
I feel like too, like, the concept of the sort of like the starving artist and the long suffering poet and all these things, like, I feel like that came back around in vogue in a time when artists could be broke and still survive. Like you didn't have to make a lot of money to be able to buy a house in the 70s, so like, yeah, go
Yeah.
live in kits, which at the time was a fucking like was like a slum, and so like, yeah, buy a song, buy a house for a song, and now 50 years later it's worth $2 million, so it's like, of course they're gonna have the attitude of like, just be broke, just lay around on the beach and write a poem every day,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's so easy. And then there's like people who have the perspective of like, well, with inflation, it's actually the same as it was in the 70s. And I'm like, do the math. It's
Yeah,
so not.
that's just not how numbers work.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have been all over the country and all over, the continent, but I think to sort of like get us from, I was reading you went to NYU and you've been in Vancouver, you're back in Calgary now, and I think where I'd like to start with that sort of trail is where we met, which was in Victoria, and I'm really curious. I've come and gone with this question, but I'm really curious, with guests like you who I haven't spoken to in so long, I'm really curious, like what people sort of hold on to, and what kind of memories kind of float up, and so I'm wondering, like, when you think of Victoria, when you think of like our friendship, like what's sort of the first things that sort of bubble up?
Oh my gosh. First thing, Saul Williams. Like,
Obsessed.
are you ready? This book
Yes. Send the
said the shotgun
shotgun.
to the head.
Mm.
This was you. Like,
Yep.
I was like in first or second year or something, and you were in fourth or fifth
I think
year.
fifth year. I took a victory lap. Yeah.
You took a victory lap. And so I think, yeah, you were doing a directed study.
Hmm.
And I don't know how I met you, probably smoking outside or at a party at probably like many people. And I don't know, we were like talking something about drums, something connected to drums. And
Yep.
then you were doing this directed study with Saul Williams, and you were very into slam poetry at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think we connected over like shared inspiration of like language and
Yeah.
profound beings like Saul Williams, who's like such a prophet. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was like awesome as like a young artist to connect with you who was like older and like felt like I could really talk to you as an equal more than like the age gap difference, you know?
Sure. That probably speaks more to my infantilized brain than anything, but I was just arrested development,
You're like, no, it's nothing like
I
that.
could just forever, this is gonna come out sounding wrong, but like I'll for the rest of my life I'll be able to very easily speak to 17-year-olds, right? I can always speak
Amazing.
that language,
Yeah, you get it. So funny.
um, um, but
Do you
yeah, no,
remember
I
that?
mean, I do. That was, I that final project that I did, for listeners who weren't in Victoria in 2010, I did this like directed study. It went through the whole year, actually. I did a bunch of different like mini workshops, basically using Saul Williams poetry to like try and inspire people to sort of express themselves and express feelings and get, basically following artistic impulses. And through the years, on reflection, I really like come and go with how I feel about the project, because I was like, we didn't do anything like radically inappropriate or anything, but there is this like sense in me that I was like, it's just like a bunch of stoned white kids like banging on pots behind the theater.
Banging on pots, like
You know?
speaking this. Yeah, I know. But that's like, there's just this, there's like aftermath feelings of any creative project you do. I feel that way about like when you said that you looked at my website, I'm like, oh God, there's like so much work that doesn't feel like my work at all. And I don't
Mm,
identify with it, but it's like this like cringiness, but you kind of have to sit in that uncomfort of like, that's what your artist life is like these things that you're chasing ideas. And then you're
yeah.
like, wow, why did I do that? No, that's fine. That was like, had to be the place I was at to do
Yeah.
that.
Well, they're like time capsules, right?
Yeah.
They're little anchor points, and I have the exact I continue to have that reckoning even with this show. I've been doing it for almost 6 years now, and
Wow.
I cannot go back and listen to old episodes
Early ones.
because it's like it's like a time machine, to like hear what I was worried about at the time, and
Yeah.
just the way I was speaking, what I was speaking about, and sometimes that's really cool, and then sometimes it's like it just makes my entire body want to like fold in on itself.
Totally. Oh, I'm like, I've been like keeping Moleskine since I was like
Hmm.
16 or 15. And the ones from when I'm 17 to 19 are amazing. I'm like,
Hmm.
who is this girl? She's like
Yeah.
so asking all the questions. It's just like all these questions are being asked and not like comments on what's happening, or like it's a different place in your brain. But then there's other ones that are just so cringe you don't even want to do. But that time, that like when I knew you, like that university time is just like that's the question asking period. If you're in a
Hmm.
lucky position to
Hmm.
like have that nurtured at school, like a lot of people get shut down at that age too. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you find that like I don't know. I guess my brain goes into this like direction of like there's a little bit of a tragedy there to hear that it was only a period of your life, right? Like even though I totally relate to what you're saying, where it was like I think back to my time, especially in Victoria, and just how I wonder about this all the time. I've been, the like novel and verse project I'm doing right now is really rooted in that idea of like, where did I go? Like how did the person I thought I was become who I am now? You know,
Yeah.
and so I really relate to this idea that that period is over, and yet at the same time too, I feel like I remain just as curious and I remain just as clueless, you know? And so
Yeah.
like what do you think is shading things differently now than then?
Um, I mean, like I mean, same with me. I still feel like as curious, asking so many questions, and I've had like repeat, just amazing periods of like
Mhm.
intense inquisition. But that period is like you're ignorant and you don't have ego.
Yeah.
Like, or some people do have ego at that age. Good
Sure.
for them.
Right,
But
right.
like, you're just like, ah, what do I do? Like, fresh out of home, just so awake and like anything, I don't know, any book makes you alive, but I feel like ego might be somehow connected to that. Like you suddenly become good at things or you
Mm,
become known for things and then you're
mhm,
like, oh, then I'm going to go do that.
mhm.
And then that becomes like a personality, like your job title
Right.
becomes. And I think that kind of happens in those
Yeah.
early
You start getting
periods.
some of the answers kind of thing, and then that sort of roots you
Yeah.
somewhere.
And you
Yeah.
run with it. And that
Interesting.
might not be the answer, but you run as hard as you can with it. Yeah.
I mean, there's no answers here. This is just a conversation, you know. Like
Totally.
this, the second you start thinking you're giving answers is the second you've gone down the wrong path, you know. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I eventually escaped Victoria and have been on my own little odyssey and have now landed myself back in Vancouver. And I'm really curious, like, obviously these are huge time jumps, so I don't expect you to just gloss over things. And I'd like you to just like tell the story how you want to tell it. But I'm really curious, how you got from UVic to the fucking Emmys, recognizing that's there's massive stories in there,
Totally.
but I'd love to hear where that starts, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. I guess the main one was I went and did my master's at NYU at Tisch School of the Arts, and that was like I really wanted to go to school in London at the time, and I was like putting everything out. I wanted to do directing and costume design and production design, and then I went to the school, and it was like not as advertised. Like you had to
Mm,
pay everything. You had to. It was like this dream school that like got me through everything. Like I just had it as like the carrot at the end of a string. But Mary Kerr, who's like still a good friend of mine, um,
blessed America.
Blessed Mary,
Yeah.
she was like, you should like interview the schools. Like, don't let them interview you. You should interview the schools. So I went to New York as a Tisch to like, just see it as a backup, and completely fell in love with the program and had these amazing designers look at my portfolio, and I was like completely lit up. Like, this is where I belong. I've got to go here. And then cut to like getting a phone call from the chair of the department at 6 in the morning in Victoria that they want to offer me a full ride and to come to the school.
Fuck
It was
yeah.
like unbelievable. I felt like all my dreams had come true and all my
Yeah.
hard work was worth it. And so I went and moved to New York City, which is like not on the bingo card. I never wanted to live in New York. It was
Yeah.
so just such like an impulse moment of like, this seems like exactly where I'm supposed to go because
Mm-hmm.
it's like so unknown for me in my dreams.
Mm.
And then I was there studying for 3 years and then um, stayed on for another two. But being the like nature girl, mountain climber that I am, it was like pretty tough to say goodbye to that part of my life in a big
Mm.
way. And like everyone I met in New York, I would just like be seeking someone who climbed mountains as well.
Yeah.
Like if someone was like, I'm from Colorado, I'd be like, mountains, let me talk to you. And they're like, I don't want to talk to you. I want New York people.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all of these people in New York are hiding from their hometowns. And I felt like I was just trying to connect to the mountains and to nature and like what really moves me as an artist.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what I didn't realize in New York, as much as it was like an incredible 5 years, loved it so much, I was seeking European theater
Mm.
and that like crazy, weird, visceral Berlin, Europe style opera and like opera
Yeah.
being cool and weird and scandalous. And it was not that at all. It was like suits, realism, America, and then the American ideals. And it was like very, I wanted to change it and I like just couldn't see my way in to
Sure.
change it in
I
that
feel
way.
like I feel like American theater's idea of being clever is just shoehorning whatever current president is in office like into a Shakespeare play, and they're like, "Ho ho, got him again, boys." You know?
Yes, exactly. And they're like, and we're going to design a perfect living room. And everyone's going to be amazed that it looks exactly like a living room with a
Yeah,
working sink. And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah. We could turn the oven
no,
on. Yeah.
that's the thing that everyone loves, the
Yep.
working like kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like has nothing connected to ideas
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah. There's an interesting like I remember when YouTube really picked up, and I remember watching it and being like, "Oh, realistic theater's dead." Like there's no reason to pursue realism in any artistic form when YouTube exists. Like I remember literally
Totally.
it was I watched Charlie Bit My Finger, and I was like, no artist will ever write something this intimate or personal or like real life,
Yeah.
like, so we might as well
Yeah.
just stop, and that wasn't like stop making art. It was like, let's stop trying to make Charlie Bit My Finger because it already exists, and
Totally.
we'll never have that impulse. So
Yeah.
um
And the way that TV has become so massive think in 14 years, what TV
mhm,
has become is like
yep,
astounding.
yep,
Like little mini movie magic every single time.
mhm,
And what theater everyone is obsessed with was so popularized because like films and TV weren't as readily accessible. And so now
yeah,
all the design is like pushing realism in TV as much as possible.
mhm,
And like at the end of the day, this is like, it's like you're in this room with all these theater creators and the audience is only limited to this place and the place that you're at. So you
right,
could have these like grandiose ideas of inclusivity and showing like the world you want to live in. But if it's the same Upper East Side audience time after time,
yep,
and that's what made me change into film because I was like, oh, the audience connection is like so much farther ranging than
totally.
theater is.
Yeah. So did
Yeah.
you end up making it over to Europe, or how did that where did you go from New York?
So from New York, I didn't go back to Europe. My parents are European, so it's funny that I've just kind of like shut that. I went and visited a lot and saw a lot of the theater, and there was a lot of
Gotcha.
theater from there that would tour to Brooklyn specifically,
Yeah.
which was amazing to see. But my dad had terminal cancer in the last 2 years of me living in New York, and that's what made me realize like. And I had immigration issues, and it was Trump was happening, and he just didn't want anyone to stay in the country, so
Mhm.
made it really hard. And it just was like, Kat, you don't want this future. Like, you don't
Yeah.
want to be American in the end, and
Right.
you want to be climbing mountains and being an artist and being close to family. So I moved back to Canada, and then a month later, my dad passed away. So it was like such a moment of like, so sure that I made the right decision that like
Yeah.
stepping away from my career, no one understood what I was doing, but in my heart, I was like the absolute right answer. Like no part of
Mhm.
me thought it was wrong.
Mhm.
And what brought me in full circle connection to the Emmys is that I met this person at my dad's funeral who connected me to my future boss in
Wow.
Vancouver, who was
Gotcha.
this amazing breakdown artist. And like mystical things, woo woo, whatever. I'm like, my dad fully connected me to this person.
100%.
There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And so, and in the end, I worked with her, and then our whole team from Vancouver was hired by HBO and moved us to Calgary.
Gotcha.
So it's like directly connected to my dad's funeral that I met this
Wow.
amazing artist in the city who's working on, she does breakdown artistry. And then I learned how to dye clothes and do all the breakdown special effects on costumes. And I loved that I wasn't in a leading role anymore. I was like
Mm,
no longer a designer. I could just focus on healing in grief and also like
mhm,
work on like the visual arts of a costume.
mm.
And then it moved me back to my hometown. So, and that show was The Last of Us,
Right.
which got nominated for an Emmy, and that's why I went to the Emmy. So,
It's fucking
how's that?
incredible. Incredible. I just like I have a million questions. Um um you know, I am a big believer, I don't you often hear people being like, the universe is doing this and that. And I think I it's not that I don't believe that stuff, it's that I don't like the term. I lean more towards I really like the term kismet. I believe that there's kismet in the world, and I think that there's these moments where you are shown doors, and then whether or not you walk through it is up to you, and I think that's
Totally.
gorgeous,
Yeah.
and it sounds like, through an incredibly painful moment, you were given choices, and that's fucking incredible. Like
I
I'm
know.
in awe
It's amazing. I mean, it makes you look back at like those. I mean, I think everyone, you must have those too in your life
all the
where
time.
it's like the deepest places that you've gone, there was a way out. Like there was a door that presented itself. And
Hmm.
it's like that's the most important door because you put all your energy into it. It's like that first step up.
Yep.
But yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, those are whoa, that just sent my brain in a whole tailspin because that's something I've been really learning a lot about is these ideas of like sort of like self ownership, self responsibility, self love, right? And for most of my life, just because of my upbringing and any number of other factors, like I was always really afraid of ideas like I always saw anything self-nurturing as ego, and ego was evil because ego meant you were putting yourself first and you always were expected to put someone else first, right?
Hmm.
That was being the good person, was sacrificing yourself for someone else, and which is all a load of horseshit. That's just anxious attachment bullshit that just it's manipulation, right? And so the more I learn about like codependency and how that stuff develops and all these elements that go into the way you show up in the world, and how you take the way you break that is by taking responsibility for yourself, and recognizing your participation in your life, right?
Yeah.
And how it really quickly becomes really fun to do that. you know
Oh yeah.
it doesn't take as long as you think it might,
Yeah.
like, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, I rule and I can do whatever the fuck I want. Like,
Yeah.
not I'm gonna go be mean to people, but it's like if I'm gonna lean into something, I'm gonna lean into it for me, right? And
Totally.
the power that comes out of that is just magnificent. Like that's
Well,
how
it just
people do things.
reminds you that you are free to choose things
Hmm.
for yourself, and that's like really true to you rather than following someone else's path.
Hmm.
And I'm like avoiding saying the word because it's so overused right now. Like
Give it
you
to me.
really do have to understand who you are
Yeah.
authentically and follow it and be like,
100%.
no, I don't want to do that. Like recently,
Mhm.
I've realized I hate climbing. I hate climbing. I
But you love the mountains.
I love the mountains. I'll hike to the top of the mountain. I'll do some scrambly bits. I'll climb to the peak.
Yeah.
But if there's like gear involved on
Fuck that
rocks,
noise.
it's so fucking boring to me. I'm like, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
I've just taken stand in my life to be like,
Fuck yeah.
no, I'm not climbing.
Yeah. Well, and the way these things change, right? I see authenticity as playing really hand in hand with integrity, and I think just like things like fate and kismet, and just like so many of the terms we use in our day-to-day life, I think that we're more often than not, we're just to the side of the real intention. We're always so close, but we're like 80% there. And so this
Yeah,
idea of like authenticity, I think it plays so directly into it. And I think what that drive it leads us towards is acting within integrity, which is like what's going to be like ethical for me, and what's going to be moral for me. And these things are different for every person. And I think recognizing your own, again, it's just that thing of like your own responsibility to yourself, and letting
yeah,
it change. Yeah, you liked climbing before and now you don't. That doesn't mean something's wrong with you now, or something was wrong with you then. It's just that like now you have different information, so now you're gonna make a different choice. Right.
totally,
And I love
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, integrity is interesting because there's more like honesty in connecting to your values when you have integrity. Like you
Yes.
have a moral compass, you have a direction. It has more of a sense of direction with integrity
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
it does with like any of the other words, I think.
Yeah. Well, and especially, you were saying before about like when you recognize, your own participation in these like cycles, like you recognize that like it's not everyone else's fault that things happen to you, right? Like, I've been learning lots about like how, I participate in cycles that I've, like, I'm trying to be cautious around, like, I'm not trying to like call anybody out or anything like that, but it's like, it's this idea that like you decide how to show up, and then when people react however it is they're going to react, my impulse usually is to like adjust myself to placate them, right? And that's
Mine
actually just
too.
like,
I'm the same.
right, it's like people pleasing
Yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah,
But like that's a form of manipulation, and I
yeah.
see it everywhere now. And the more I learn about this stuff, I see people, I'm on forums talking about these things, and I'm seeing people being like, if they would just do this, then everything would be good. I'm so good. I'm doing the best I can. Why aren't they doing? And it's like, no, you're not actually doing the best you can, because you are like negotiating for something that you're being told shouldn't be happening. So quit trying to make it happen.
Totally,
Um, and then that,
totally.
and then that, I think that spirit, you know, gets put into everything you do in your life, right? Like, and so if you, I'm spitting my brain out. Sorry, I'm having a little autistic fucking spiderweb thought, but
Okay, I'm here. Here
thank
for
you,
it.
thank you. But it's like, yeah, but if you root yourself in the integrity of the choice, then you kind of can't go wrong, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but it's about choosing for yourself, not about choosing for like, well, if I do this, then someone else will like it, or someone else will
Someone
do
else will be
this.
happy. Their
Then
mood will
exactly,
change. Then they'll feel better.
exactly,
It's like, well, are you feeling good right now? Or do you
bingo.
just feel the tension in the room? Are you like uncomfortable with that discomfort of like someone being
Mm-hmm.
sad or frustrated because you don't get
Mm-hmm.
frustrated because it annoys other people? It's like, what can
Yeah.
you learn in that frustration moment? I'm like learning a lot about that too. Like, I'll be like, oh, well, they're just not good at the things I'm good at. And my therapist was like, why don't you flip that around and realize that you're not good at the things that they're really good at? Like, instead of being like, oh, well, I'm so good at making decisions and moving swiftly, they're so much better at patience than I am. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of that is patience. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I never thought to flip it around before.
Right?
It's
And it's
so
like if you remove
simple.
the competition element of it altogether, right? And if you
Yeah,
just say, "Wow, you're good at this, I'm good at this. I'd like to work on this. You can work on whatever the fuck you want to, because it's none of my business," right?
totally. It's like hands off. This is, yeah, yeah, it's all so wild. Yeah, you learn so much. Like if you want to learn more, you learn more. But if you don't want to
Yes.
and you're just like happy go lucky, happy with the way everything is in the world, which definitely shouldn't be at this point.
I was gonna say, so you're a sociopath, or
Yeah, exactly.
um, yeah, I wonder about that sometimes. I wonder, like, do you do you sometimes feel like an envy for people who appear ignorant to the world?
Yeah.
Because they talk
Oh
about
my God,
ignorance is
yes.
bliss, but
Yeah, and
do
it
you
looks
feel
like it
that?
is though.
That's
Um,
what I mean, though. It looks like it is, but
it
I
looks like
I
it is.
wonder if what the internal world actually is like.
I know because okay, this is what I first think of when you say that and ask me that. I think of people at like coffee shops who just don't even notice that there's a lineup behind them
Right.
and that it's a really busy time and that they're just taking up all this beautiful, like they're just holding space in their thing, getting their needs met. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all they're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Taking a very long time to do it. And there's a huge group of people. And I'm like the opposite. I'm like, oh, no, I don't actually, it's fine. Don't worry. Like, I'm like trying to go faster. Oh, shoot. I didn't even order my coffee in the end because I'm like so worried about the lineup behind me.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Just
my
ran past the
internal.
cashier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
haven't even paid or something. And I admire the people who can just hold space, say what they
Mhm.
need, be in that zone. Doesn't seem like they're freaking out about anyone. Like the
Mhm.
people who in public spaces who can just be there. I'm like, are you a free human? Like mentally, are you free of the thing?
Yes.
Yeah,
I wonder because my impulse is it goes towards like that must be so selfish, that must be, but it's like that's me imposing a judgment on someone, right? Like I have no idea what their inner world is, I have no idea what their inner monologue is, I don't even know if they have one or not, and I
yeah,
think that like the impulse, it's something I've been trying to scratch at recently, is this as I see the conversation around whether it's about mental health in general or going deeper into attachment theory or just all the networks of all those different concepts and modalities that come into play, it makes me really realize that like I mean capitalism is the root of all evils, and it really, we're like culturally indoctrinated to be anxiously attached to, in that like we're expected we're expected to be anxiously attached as a consumer, but we're expected to be avoidantly attached as a citizen, So it's
yeah,
like, so it creates this like almost like schizophrenia in us where we're supposed to be super mindful of everyone else. And yet at the same time, we're also supposed to be saying, fuck you, I'm going to get mine first,
yeah,
And so it's this like conflict, like internally, that just cannot reconcile itself.
yeah. Oh, that like sinks my heart just like knowing that feeling so deep, like how true that is. It's
I'm
completely dystopian. Like someone should write a novel that's so banal in its existence and description of life, but it has that message of like
Yeah.
the avoidant versus the anxious.
I mean, I think
You
you
want to take
just
that?
landed. I was gonna say. Look, I'm not. I fucking hate writing prose. So, like, I think maybe we'll dog ear it. We'll dog ear it. We'll get a ghostwriter.
I need the ghostwriter for that one for sure. That's
There's a
real
reason I write
realism.
poetry. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, it's quick. It's good
It's
for my
quick.
ADHD. You know.
It's out.
Right?
Absolutely.
At the heart of the whole project, whatever this thing has become, is this question of what is a friend, and like and how do we be friends in this society, and so I'm curious for you, um what does being a friend mean?
Um, I think there's so many different types of friends. Like you can have many different definitions of friends, but a core friend, I think, is someone who's like weathers the storm with you, but is there when the dust settles. And it could be that you're on it on your own. You're like in the storm alone, but they're going to be there at the end of it, like
Mm-hmm.
always. And on that about friendship, like there's amazing friends who have, if you have a past with friends, like they've seen you through different areas of your life, like different emotions, different landmarks, and they've like witnessed your patterns just like you've witnessed theirs. I feel like then you are friend. Like that's like
Yeah.
an up level of a friendship is when you've like witnessed them through something landmark. Could be happy or sad.
Yeah.
And if you just see that and like share those things and you're like creating a history together, I feel like that's what makes you able to show up for each other in the future.
Yeah. Witness is an incredible term behind that. I think
Yeah.
that's just that evokes such a philosophy behind it that really like, whoa, it like I always use the term like it spiderwebs my brain because suddenly I'm thinking 9 different thoughts at once. Um something I've been thinking a lot about, that actually kind of trails into that I'm curious your thoughts on is I sometimes I think we're mistaking genuine friendship with like trauma bonding and like enabling, because there's these ideas of like unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
um that I think. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like we were never really modeled unconditional love by our parents, like because you can't model it for someone else because life always comes with conditions. I think the only person you truly can love unconditionally is yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and so when friends say things like I love you unconditionally, it makes me like I don't trust that, and I don't think I trust people who enable friends to be shitty, who, I don't think I trust people who will always have your back no matter what, or things like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's this idea. I heard this quote recently that was talking about like a true act of love is to allow a friend to experience the full scope of the consequences of their actions,
Yeah.
and to not protect them from that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious where you land in that sort of like is a friend someone who just like unquestionably has your back, or is it someone, like you mentioned about like sometimes you weather the storm alone and then they come out later, like where do you sort of land in all that?
Oh, I have so much experience with this, like exactly this. Like
I think going through theater
having,
school, you sort of it's trial by fire with friends.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, I mean, I think that like I think this connects to what you're saying. A friend of mine, I quit like partying and like drugs and alcohol abuse 2 years ago, and it was a
Congratulations.
journey I had. Thank you. It was a journey I had to go on alone to get there and decide. But I had a friend really like talk to me about it before I made the decision myself,
Mm,
and that to me is the most pure unconditional friendship. Is that she could have lost me in that moment, and I could have gone deeper into drugs in that moment or alcohol. But instead, she was like, "This is not who you are. You're becoming
mm,
shitty."
mhm,
Like, it's like comments on your state of being, basically.
mhm,
And
mhm,
that is like such a risk to take as a friend.
mhm.
And knowing that you could like you could lose the friendship in that moment. And
Yeah.
that's enough of a reason, though, to like love someone that much that you're willing to lose them, but also like help them save themselves at the same time. But it's
Yeah.
not their job after that to walk you through the steps to get there.
Yes.
So like that's the complicated nature of friendship. It's like
Mhm.
having history with someone enough to know who they really are and when they're not being themselves, when they're not showing up to the community, but then also like knowing that you can say that, but then it's not your job to walk them through the door.
Yeah.
So like I feel like that's the messiness of friendship is
Yeah.
knowing when it's okay and safe to say those things and when it's like totally not your job and not
Yes.
safe. And there's no rules on either of them. And you don't really there's like no handbook at all of when it is right and when it's not right.
Mhm.
But it's pretty profound when it is right, you know.
Well, and that's just it, is that I think that I'm someone who's never this is one of the whole reasons for the show is that I've never really had long deep friendships,
Mm,
and I've had just sort of like people come and go in my life, and I've always been so curious about like how do people hold on to friends, like how do and what I've really come to value is realizing that like you only really get those kinds of friends a couple times. You don't really you don't keep making that kind of friend, you know.
No.
And I do have that kind of friend, so I do recognize that like I think I was chasing, almost like I was chasing the high in a way of like the thing I have with like two people in my life, but with like as many people as possible.
With like 30, and you're like, I can
Yeah,
have this deep connection with all these people, but if you don't have a
exactly.
history, it's hard
And you
to
never
start from
will,
scratch. Yeah,
right?
because
Right.
you're never going to have that age, this age. I mean, maybe when you're 60 and you
Exactly.
have this 30 years that you have not yet experienced,
Yeah.
you'll be at that level.
But it's like the rush, you know? And I think what you said about like, because that plays into so much of what like my therapy is teaching me, and then just like my reading and everything is just this idea of like you only get to live your life, and when you try to live somebody else's life for them, or when you try to get them to live your life for you, like you're losing the plot, and so it's like it's almost like friends are there to like they're still on their own path, but every once in a while your paths kind of like swoop
Yeah,
together, and they right.
totally. Totally. And that's a hard thing, like moving countries and like moving cities,
Mm,
and is to remember that like some friends, I think we all have this experience. Some friends you do not have to talk to.
yeah.
And when you see them, it's like no time has passed. It's totally fine that you don't talk all the time. It's totally fine you don't text. You trust in the stability and foundation that like 5 years will pass and you show up again. And there's literally no harboring of anything because there's different like levels of friendship in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like releasing that kind of control, like it was hard when I was in New York because I really spent a lot of energy in my Canadian relationships to continue those,
Right.
so that if I chose to go home, I would have a community to return to.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of that's important when you're the one to leave. It's kind of your job to be the one to keep in touch, is what I've
Totally.
learned. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a powerful perspective because it's so true. Um that like cuz everybody's just in their lives. If you're the one leaving the city, like nothing's changing for them other than you're just not coming out anymore.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
you have to if you want to be present in their mind, you have to make yourself be present in their mind, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Which is counterintuitive to like all my instincts, which is to just like hide.
Yeah. Oh yeah. These kind of have to, they're kind of like piggyback on each other.
Sure.
But did you have a creative mentor, and are you still in touch?
Oh, that's such a good question. Not really in the sense that the type of mentor I always wanted, which was someone who had done the thing I wanted to do and was giving me like constructive but honest developmental instruction. Um, so I never really got that with like my writing and things like that. I got close a few times, but like I've still never really found that mentor figure for me. So a lot of my writing still, even to this day, I've been writing poetry for 15 years, and I still feel like I'm flailing most of the time. But
Mm-hmm.
um, in other elements, though, like Warwick Dobson from UVic was very much a mentor for me. Ned Vukovic, who was my first year acting teacher, was very much a mentor for me. Um, like my high school drama teacher, Mr. Dean, they were definitely, they were influences on me in periods of my life. But yeah, no contact with any of them, unfortunately. Um, some it's harder to be in touch with than others, but yeah, I the sort of role of the mentor has always been something that's been very elusive for me, and that's been one of the sort of like frustrations, or I don't know the right word for it. It's been one of the things I've continued to really seek,
Yeah.
and have
Well, they
never really
haven't come
landed on.
yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like they'll
But
come at a different age.
I was gonna say, they say there's that saying of like when the student's ready, the teacher will
The
appear,
teacher
right?
will come.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm just not ready yet.
Well, and I think like you're probably a mentor to a lot of people as well. whether you know it or not.
You know,
Like,
I mean,
if you
I
can't
I
find that
appreciate that.
person for you, you are already like the way that you're embodying your life and embodying the way that you can show up as a writer is probably
Mm,
inspiring a lot of people
that's a
in
nice
their own
thought.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nice thought. I hope so. You know, like, I've never really thought about it like that. I've always, it's such a it's hard for me to conceptualize that stuff because I don't try to live I don't try to live profoundly, I don't try to live like a guru or some shit. Like I just am just trying the best I can, and I fuck up all the time, and I rarely I mean I stick the landing a lot more rarely than I would like, and so to think about that is like it's intimidating, right? Like cuz it's
Yeah.
like
I mean, it's not
I
the reason you're doing things for
yeah,
sure, but it
yeah.
could be yeah, just thinking of mentorship, like you might be one as well.
I mean, I sure hope so. I mean, because that's the other side of it, right? Is that it's this idea of like I, even back in New Vic, it was like it's always been my philosophy of like whatever I do, whatever impulse I follow, whatever art I create, if it makes one person feel something, then like the job's done, um because I mostly just create for myself. I create for therapy, and I create for just like getting the thought out of my body, and if it
Hmm.
resonates with somebody, then that kicks ass. But it's like my job's already done by the time the art is out of me,
Totally.
right?
I mean, even just like how like I had to become reflective even just for this. And
mm,
like I'm so grateful for that. That like
mm,
I'm having to ask myself what community means and friendship and
yeah,
who you are and this memory from so long ago and like how precious that is and like you get to do that every week with all these people. Like that's you're like doing something people probably have always dreamed of doing and you get to you've like that's amazing that you've been doing it for 6 years and
that's
reconnecting with these long lost souls.
that's really nice of you to say, because it is something I feel really grateful for. I love this fucking show. Like I've yet to
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 6 years. I think I've been paid a collective like $200, like through the whole thing. Like I am not in it for the money, it's just, yeah, it is a really magic experience to be able to, you know, I I think it's a pretty universal experience for people to be like, "Oh yeah, so and so from back in the day. I love that guy. I wonder how he's doing," and then never doing
Yeah. And
anything about it,
nothing.
right?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the impulses of the show, was to be like, I miss everyone all the time, like I the nature of my brain is that I like don't really have that like memory degradation, and so like the moment I think of someone, I'm like I'm back the last time we spoke,
Yeah.
and I'm
And
just
you
like,
remember
fuck yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, and
I get that. I feel that too. And it like some
mhm,
people I don't know very well and I'll like remember all these details. And like I'm not being creepy, I just have a really
yeah.
good memory.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and like I'll forget all kinds of other shit. I forget stuff all the time, but it's like I was talking about this the other day of this like my brain will do this thing where it'll clock things that it believes is important to the other person, so it's like it won't always clock stuff that actually is important, like dates or times or appointments or like actual things that I have to plan for, but it'll clock information that's like, oh, that sounded like something that was important to that person, so it's gonna store it away,
Mm,
and it'll be very random sometimes, and yeah, I've definitely come across like a complete creep for remembering like really fucking random shit sometimes, when it's like you couldn't remember my last name but you remember like where I was when my grandma died,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but
100%.
yeah, so it's like, yeah, it is. I thank you for that framing, because it's really kind of you, and it also is like it feels very validating, because it kind of is a part of the spirit of the show, is like one of the intentions is to like make everyone who's on the show feel as special as they have made me feel at some point in my life,
Mm,
and to like really celebrate their stories and really give them a chance to feel like the fucking celebrities that they are in my eyes, right? So
totally. That's amazing. Good for you.
thank you. Um that leads me into, you mentioned it very very passingly there, but that is the continuation of the sort of core of the show is, if a friend is the sort of like the individual connection, then I guess technically we could think of the community as like growing multiple connections and these kinds of things. And it's a question that I've only just started asking quite recently, kind of in the most recent season, and I don't really have an answer for it yet personally. I continue to sort of mull it over, and I'm really curious for you, what does it mean to sort of like, I guess the simple question is, what does community mean to you? But I think deeper into that is like, what does it mean to you to like show up within community and exist in community, and like,
Mm.
what is the responsibility to community? These kinds of things.
Yeah, I feel like this is a hard one to answer. And I was like, really, I can only get into it as a feeling. Like when I feel like I'm a part of a community, um, it could be a whole room of strangers,
Hmm.
but it's this moment where you remember what it's like to be a human being. It's like
Mm.
the like very carnal, I don't even know if that's the right word. Carnal. What's the other
Yeah.
word?
Yeah, I mean, carnal
It's like
isn't always just it isn't always debauchery. Carnal is like it's a
yeah,
sensory thing. So you're
it's
using
like
it right. Yeah.
you're like in the soul being of your. I don't know. Like oh, I'm
It's
trying to
like
figure out what the word is.
instinctual. It's like deep in the
It's like
bones.
deep instinctual. Like this is humanity is
Mhm.
being in a collective group of people sharing ideas, talking, connecting, but like usually, I mean, you can find communities online, of course, and can be seen online 1,000%. But I find for me, when community is most like deep rooted, is when I'm like, forget about my phone and no one's on their phone and you're all there, raw humans without technology showing up as a community. And like, that's
Mm.
the carnal nature that I guess I'm trying to talk about is like what we were meant to be from the beginning is like these
Mhm.
social beings who group together and make decisions together.
Yeah. We're a social monkey, and we're years and years and years ago. I don't know how much real science there is behind this, but it always stuck in my brain. I think some random guy on the street told me this in Victoria, so take it with a grain of salt. But he was describing like, nervous systems as like magnets, and that there's like a magnetic draw within our energy that feeds off of each other. And so when, we're drawn to each other because of those sort of circular systems and the nervous systems and the energies that we put off, and we're nourished by in-person physical presence.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
like
what regulating is, right?
totally. And like when you're reminded of the human experience, it's almost like one of those like I Spy books where there's like a baker and a post person and like a dog walker and like you're looking at like all these hubs of a city or an urban life. And I'm like, when I'm in a community, I'm like talking to my neighbor in the hallway. I know their
Hmm.
name. I see a stranger on the street. We exchange some weird sentiment about something. Like
Yeah.
there's a town hall meeting, or you're mad about a building being erected, and then you're like, I'm gonna write to my person. I'm gonna give them a call about it, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna be incensed about this. I'm gonna take action. It's like just things from like old days
Yeah.
back in your life, and you're reminded that those things are the most important things.
Hmm. Hmm. Man, it's so fascinating, and it's like, I'm not somebody who, I don't think we can ever get rid of the internet. Like, I think that cat's out of the bag,
Yeah,
and I'm
and we love it.
curious. Well, and exactly, and it's like, and I'm here for it. I work because of the internet.
Yeah,
Everything I do is because of the internet. So like, all hail Mr. Internet, or Mrs. Whatever, whatever, or whoever the
yeah,
internet is. But like, um, I do. believe that we have to get a grip on it though, and I'm wondering, like, by no means am I like, how are we going to solve this, but like, where do you think we go? Like, where do we take this nebulous horror show that is social media and internet culture and all these things, and how do we balance it with like being a human being and only having the capacity for like 100 names in our brain before everyone becomes an enemy, and and all those things, right?
Oh man, yeah. Oh, I think that for me, this is like so personal. It's just to get back in the real world. Like you can meet online, you can discuss things online, but there's like nothing better than getting like you could like even sharing memes. I'm like save them for me and then show them to me in person, and we can
Yeah.
laugh about them. Or that's like a very small example. Even like meetup groups, or like I'm sure like meeting people through social media. Like if you can meet in person once, or yeah, there's or like group. I don't know. There's like probably groups in Vancouver that are doing cold plunges in the morning, and
Yeah.
like joining, like just getting out of your comfort zone to like join the community in that way, and remember
Yeah.
that there's so much more outside the internet. And that nervousness that you feel if you're like I get so nervous showing up to event like things alone,
Hmm.
even though I'm such an independent person and I'm so confident on my own. I'll like drive thousands of miles on my own, but like to show up to like a fitness class alone, I'm like, okay, here we
Shoot me
go,
dead. Yep.
let's do this. And I'm like
Yep.
building my confidence all day. It's like, wow, funny how that can trigger you. But then you feel so much greater and bigger at the end of it because you did something
Yeah.
that freaks you out. I just think so much is like just get back in person.
Yeah.
Use online, we love it. It's an amazing research tool. But then like also, can it be done in person? I don't know.
It's almost like
What
it
do you
needs to be
think?
it's almost like it needs to be the diving board, but the pool needs to be the real world,
Yeah.
like, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, I know everything you're saying I'm in complete agreement with, and I I was thinking about how, like, funny enough, it was a meme. It was, it's that kind of, I don't know if it's like a singular meme or if it's just a recurring line about like every time I go on a trip, I pack like 10 pairs of underwear because I'm convinced that this is the trip that I'm gonna suddenly explosively shit my pants every day for 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it's never happened before, but this will be the time.
Yeah.
And it's like I get that kind of anxiety every time I go do anything. Is that I'm like, oh, what if I sign up for some like intramurals baseball team and it's like my first game? I'm like, that's gonna be the time I like say something horrendously offensive or I do something
Yeah.
just soul
Like you
damagingly.
completely lose trust in yourself and you're like, I'm just
Exactly.
going to lose who I am immediately and just be
Exactly.
like, who am I when I'm completely out of my element?
Yes.
Might be
That's
more you than ever, to be
Well,
honest.
and that's just it. And that's it right there. And thank you for saying it like that, because that's the framing, is that it's like it's this fear of losing yourself, but it actually is like it's just challenging yourself, like my day job is I'm a skills development teacher, and it's so cheesy, but it's so true in that, like, you don't grow in comfort, like you only really grow in challenge and in kind of in opposition. Like, it's one of the frustrations of life, is that, like,
Yeah.
we're 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 like, I guess the analogy is that it's like, a flower, like, the seed grows under the soil by pushing itself through the soil. It doesn't sit on top of the soil in comfort. It's got to
Yeah.
work, like.
1,000%. Yeah.
I,
My friends make fun of me, but they also admire this part of me is that I'm like, I love hard things. Like,
mm.
especially since quitting like partying and alcohol and like being outside the system that is like everyone else is doing the same thing in society over and
Mhm,
over and over again. And as soon as you're like, I'm not doing that anymore, but I'm still going to be around you,
mhm.
it's so hard, but it's so liberating because you're like choosing not to act in that way. And then like running, it's like, oh my God, it's so hard. and you just tell yourself to do it, and then you do it, and then you realize who you were before the run and who you are after, and you're like, I just think like difficult things and challenges are like my most motivating. It like makes me feel invincible. It's amazing. The harder thing I do, the more I'm like, what else can I do?
Fuck
It gets
yeah.
me so high. But maybe that's like an addict brain. I don't know. I think a
Hey,
lot of people feel that way.
it's a good vice to have. I actually, as of this recording, I just day before or yesterday, I hit 5 months sober. Of all the things, of all the with the exception of vape, as I've been.
Congratulations. Oh,
Thank you. I
vape,
mean, this is.
just keep going. It's
I was like,
fine.
of all the vices I could have, 5 months ago, this was the least of my worries. So
Yeah,
it's still low on the totem. Um,
that's
but I'm curious.
amazing.
Thank you. I'm 2 years is fucking incredible, and I'm curious, because I've recently started being able to go like to parties. I go out dancing, like I go out and do stuff I would have done high or drunk or whatever, and I go do it sober now, and I have a fucking blast.
I
Um,
know. Yeah.
and I'm curious, like, yeah, like, is it like what's that journey been like? Obviously, I don't know. Everybody's recovery story is very different and very personal, so you don't have to go detailed or anything. But like,
Yeah, just the fun
where are
of
you
it. I
at
think
in
that
that?
a lot of people think that sobriety is like horribly boring. And
It's incredible.
it's actually not. And
Yeah,
you can be your most weird, strange, outgoing self. Like, I'm
yeah,
like, oh, these are the spaces where I can actually just be like
hmm,
energized, jumping, dancing, like going so full on to match the energy of all the drunk people. And it's so
yeah,
you're just like, this is great. And it's, and then you feel amazing the next day. And then you can like
yeah.
do your thing the next day, whatever it is that you want to do. Like that is
That's
like the time you get in your life. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the fun of it too. I remember the very first party I went to where I was watching everyone's like vocabulary slip as the hours went by, and I was like, and I was feeling better and better as the night went on. And it was so fascinating to be like, oh, you're doing this because you want to get out of your head, and you can
Yeah.
just do that by just getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's all, and this is with no judgment, and this is with no like malice towards people who drink or do drugs or anything like that. It's self-medication, and you know I've recognized part of my sobriety has been like, so what was I masking, like what was I trying to cover up, what was I
A
really
thousand
trying to get
percent.
through, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like also, and like, what was I, it was like a signal of help. Like, I'm like not okay. Like, I'm so happy, bubbly all the time. And like, one of those people that like seems like they're got it all under control. And like,
Hmm.
people are like, you're so strong. And it's like, yeah, but then you're not. And
Yep.
there's a lot of other stuff. And so for me, it was like, and like a call for help more than anything, and like
Yeah.
acting out, but not, but like in no longer doing that, I have to like completely own my emotions and like check in with myself now. And it's like, if I feel the energy come up where you're like, I just want to do this thing or like do what I
Hmm.
used to do, then like I'll go running, go for a walk. And it's like, it lasts like 5 minutes, maybe 10 max, and you solve
Yep.
it and you're back.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, it's like, it's just remarkable what your brain can do in like leaving those patterns behind. But you're right. There is a point in the night that I'm like, you're no longer present. Not me, but them.
Yeah.
And it's fine. But
Yeah.
you won't remember this conversation. And it's really made me ask myself about like presence. Like, when you're with
Hmm.
friends and when you're drinking, there is a point in the night when you're no longer present for anyone.
Hmm.
And do you want to keep doing that? Like, what does that mean to you as a friend in your community? And like, when you're sober, you're still present for the conversation. You're still going to remember everything.
Hmm.
And there's definitely a point when it goes beyond that and you're like, I don't need to be here anymore. Like,
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah. Well, that's been one of the driving questions behind this is like, since getting sober, it's recognizing how many people I thought were friends when really it was like we were just drinking beside each other, like because we were drinking for our own reasons that we weren't really talking about, and you trick yourself into thinking that's your friend because you're blind together, you know?
Yeah.
Right? And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
that's not a friend at all, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know. And again, I don't mean to sound judgy, but it's just
But
like
also amazing.
they're
Like
not your
those
friend.
memories are incredible.
Yes.
Those drinking partners are like so great in
Angels.
your life. Like I have so many angels like that in New York that like completely changed my life. Couldn't have done New York
Mhm.
without them. They were all drinking friends. So who has been who have been like the artists or writers or like Saul Williams obviously was one, but like someone like Saul Williams for you, who else have they been like over since I've known you, like since the
Yeah.
time that we've left each other?
Yeah. Well, okay, so like yeah, so in university, my like holy trinity was Saul Williams, Bob Dylan, and Allen Ginsberg. They but like way to fucking set the bar high, you
I
know?
know.
It's like
Wow.
paralyzing, right? Like to like I remember when I first read Howl and I read it like 4 times in a night and I was just like every time I was like I would finish it and would feel so charged. And then I would try to write and I would just feel so deflated, you know? And I'd just be like, why even bother? You know,
Yeah.
like I'll
I
never do
understand.
this,
Yeah.
right? You know? Yeah. And so you know, over the years, have been really cautious around getting too like, this is the guy, you know? And actually more often than not I'll very actively like not reread stuff that has had big impact on me. So like Sylvia Plath had a huge moment. I read The Bell Jar and I just was like fucking devastated, you know.
Mm,
And we'll never read it again. Like you couldn't pay
hmm.
me to read it again because it's just like I just remember that summer so vividly because of that book, you know.
Because of the book, it was connected completely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's remarkable, though. That a piece like that is a chapter in your life fully.
I mean, have you read it yet? Have you ever read The Bell
No.
Jar? Oh, it's fucking unbelievable. I feel like it's one of those like everyone should read it. It's fucking
Okay.
incredible.
I'm writing it down.
Sylvia Plath is like fuck Ted Hughes forever because we would still have Sylvia Plath if it wasn't for him. So like just yeah, the story behind that is just tragic. She's incredible. Um Joan Didion is had a major influence on me as I was like moving from just poetry to then trying to expand and write essays and write you know different kinds of prose and stuff like that. She wrote one novel called Played as It Lays that was devastating. And then lots of essays, you know. I think her big one is called Slouching Towards Bethlehem. And there's actually an essay that I used to go back and read like once a year and then stopped because I was like, it's just too much. But it's about her moving to Brooklyn. It's called Goodbye to All That or
I read
Farewell.
it when I left New York. I had read it like six
Yeah.
times. I was like,
Yeah.
when I was leaving, and it was goodbye to all that.
Gotcha.
That was my
Yeah.
essay for sure. Yeah. It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
It's
It's
amazing.
like her language is just like
Yeah.
fucking I don't even know. You know, there's some writers who you'll just like it's so natural and I'm just like how do you even how do you choose how to say that, you know, like and this is it's funny because this actually plays into the whole thing of like why I've always wanted a mentor because like I don't really know how to like dissect text. I don't really know how to break it down. I know feeling and I know impulse and I'll read something and I'm like I liked that and then I'll just sort of put it away and I have no
Hmm.
real idea
You're not
why.
like, why do I like that?
Yeah,
What is like the profound moment where I like that?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I've never really learned how to do that. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like any other like um I'm blanking of course. Oh my god. The one this is why uh okay, so Frank O'Hara, uh, poet from the '60s, who he only had 2 collections, but he had this one collection called Lunch Poems that he it was named because he was just writing poems on his lunch break. Like I think he was a lawyer or something like that, and he would write poems on his lunch break, and then he collected them, and they're like the most fucking incredible poetry that's ever been written.
Wow.
He died really young, but yeah, I found lunch poems really pretty soon after university, and it became like that remains my favorite collection of poetry ever. Um, but it got kind of ruined for me very recently because of an ex and because of things that happened because of that. So we're Frank and I are on a timeout at the moment because I think of him and then I think of them and I just go so
It's
um
hard because there's
yeah.
people that you want, yeah, like you want those writers to be precious to you. And if you share them, do you connect like a song that you love? And then if you share
Yes.
it, is that going to remind you of that person?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's
Yeah.
that's one of those like scary vulnerabilities. My therapist always says like you can't live authentically unless you live softly, but you can't live softly without risking being killed because
Mm,
because you have to show your belly, right? Like to be
yeah.
truly vulnerable, you have to like here's my soft bits, right? And so you have to risk it, and that's really fucking scary because in my experience those people then kill you. And so
Because they've got like
yeah,
ammo. They've got the
exactly,
ammo to know how
exactly.
to. Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel
so yeah, and then they ruined Frank O'Hara for me, the
that. They fucking
bastards.
ruined Frank O'Hara. That would be a
uh,
great poem to all the songs you lost, all the writers you lost. Yeah.
um Kat, are you like we've now got two like banger ideas that I'm like, I think we just landed on $1 million idea here. Like, where have you been
Totally.
all my life?
We just do brainstorm reading writing sessions now.
Fuck though. Um, how about you? What are you like? Do you have any big names that have come through your life in the last 15 years?
That's 50 is so loaded.
Right, I know.
So sorry for that. That was, oh man. I feel like for me it was Tom. I was obsessed with Tom Robbins like in my early
Mm,
20s, like kind of surrealist
still
modernism,
life
real
with
realism.
Woodpecker.
Still Life with
Uh,
Woodpecker.
Life changing. I only drank tequila for like 4 years because of the character in that book.
That's another thing is like books that make you drink what they're drinking. What
Yes.
was it? Sun Also Rises
Mm. The
by what's
Hemingway,
his name,
the
Hemingway,
the
and he
not the
drinks
sarsaparilla.
Pernod.
That's what it was.
Pernod.
Yes. Yes.
And I used to drink that. That was like my last, yeah, that was like 24, 25. I was like obsessed with drinking Pernod because you could only chase it with water. And I was like,
Yeah.
Ernest Hemingway. And that has the saddest ending of a book I've ever read about a couple who's
Yup.
like, yeah. But yeah, I've kind of like stopped reading and I want to bring it back. But I usually read an author like all the way through. Like I read all of Tom Robbins novels and then I
Mhm.
read all of Vonnegut and like kind of go through that.
I like
And I
that.
got Franny and Zooey is one of the books,
Mm.
J.D. Salinger, that I reread every year, because I have three brothers and she has all these brothers. And it's like this really beautiful kind of, yeah, what it is to be a sister and what it is to be inspired by your brothers, to connect with them, to
Mm.
have like, it felt like a really honest relationship with all these beings in her family that I love so
Yeah.
much. And
I,
then, like, yeah, you go.
no, I was just gonna say
Jumping.
Salinger has always been such a challenge for me, not because I don't like him at all. Like I adore his writing, but um I've always found myself I took the opposite experience that you had because I always found it um I link him with like I know it's not the same style, but it's like I always think of like his characters in the same vein as like Arrested Development family or like Succession family, and like I always found it really triggering because I have very contentious relationships with my family, and to read the tension between the siblings was always
Yeah,
really activating for me, So
totally.
I loved like I think he's fucking incredible, and at the same time too, like I'm terrified of those books because it's
Yeah,
like I just have little like micro meltdowns.
yeah. It's real. It's like how I feel about writers like that. and same with songwriters, is that I'm so envious of, is how do you actually experience the world and remember that like in between feeling? Like you're not just going to the bus, but like the thoughts of you alone on the street going to the bus in the middle of winter, blah blah blah, snow
Yep.
falling, there's light. Like how do you remember every moment and then also write it down? I remember all the moments, but I'm never writing them down. So when I hear a
Hmm.
song or read a book, I'm like, that's the thing, that's the feeling.
Hmm.
I just don't. That's just not the kind of artist I am. I guess I'm more visual, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like so. I'm in awe of that. And there's actually a line in Zoe and Franny and Zoe, that he talks about that line to be or not to be,
Hmm.
and he like goes into it, and it I like never I'm like always skipped over that line, but in this book he like puts gravity to it and you understand why it's so beautiful, and it's about like the meaning of your bones when you die. Like
Yeah.
what do your bones mean? What do you want your bones to mean? And it gave me
Yeah.
such like a jolt of like direction, like, oh, that's what you're working towards. You're working towards what your bones mean at the end of the day. Like, talk about integrity, if that's the word
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that
Holy
writer.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm literally like I'm looking over at my shelf to where that book is and I'm like I think I have to go give it another read
You should
again.
read it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
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 There's some good bits
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Um like you're fucking incredible. Thank you so much. I'm watching the time and I've only got my one last question to kind of wrap things up, but like before we do, I just yeah, I find myself in absolute awe of you and like and you know who I remember you as 15 years ago to who I'm speaking to today. It's so fascinating because it's like at once you are the exact same person and you have that same light and you have that same joy and you're so engaging, and at the same time too like you've lived this incredible life and you're open and you're honest, and it's just it's really refreshing, and I find myself just like feeling so lucky to have just gotten a chance to talk to you today. And
Oh
I
my
want to say thank you
gosh.
so much, you know?
Aw, that's so sweet.
Um,
Make me feel like, yeah, it's beautiful to like honor your ride and thank you for seeing that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, and yeah, it's not always easy, but you're here and that's what counts. You
Yeah.
know?
Still
Right?
here.
um the last little thing I always like to leave on, I always try to leave listeners, I don't know if they actually use them or not, but I always like to leave them with like an actionable suggestion for the week. And so I'm curious, what is one thing people could try doing this week to be a better friend, either to themselves or to their community?
Mm. I learned this trick from my best friend who like blew me away of what she does to be a good friend. And she writes down important dates or things of note, like anniversaries. Like I know, I don't know, any anniversary, any date. If you're like getting a house, if your friend is moving and they're moving that day, or if they're signing a lease, or they're like getting the rights to them, or their cat, I don't know. They're just like the most random, banal things. If you don't have a very good memory, write a reminder, and then it seems inauthentic, but it's just like the biggest thing is to like send a text remembering that
Mm-hmm.
thing or remembering that death anniversary. That's like huge. Like there's so many things around grief and losing people that like you could be a better friend on. Like saying the name of the people who've died out loud. That is like never a faux pas. That is like so welcome all the time.
Yeah.
And like I feel like the way that you show up in a friendship is what you're going to get back. So if you make something really special or you pick up like a treat or you can like write something really banal or like a heart on a note of paper or like a weird drawing that like looks like garbage. Someone was going to cherish that and put it in their wallet and think of you. Like it's so easy to do unbelievably beautiful things for your friends.
Yeah. I fucking love that. I'm gonna go do that myself. Fuck the listeners. I'm gonna
Yes.
go do that. You know.
Yay.
um, where do you have anything coming up? Oh my god, I have one last question. Did you meet Pedro, and what does he smell like in real life?
My only interaction with Pedro was I was eating lunch. I mean, I've seen him a million times at the studio, but he knocked me off of my stool when I was eating lunch one day. That was the
With his
closest I got
looks.
to him. With his looks, he made me fall. He's incredibly handsome in person.
I needed to get that one in there. I'm just like, oh, fucking Pedro.
Yeah.
Only met him the once though. He knocked you off. What was the
No,
real
he was.
story? His
I
story,
was
actually.
just eating lunch outside, and he like was going to do something with the camera, and I found like a secret back door that I could have my lunch, and that was his secret back door apparently. So,
Fuck.
anyways, that was like my closest. I just made all the costumes look so dirty. That's it. So,
Fair,
um,
fair.
we weren't on set all the time. Yeah,
I mean, you did an incredible job. That was a fabulous show.
yeah,
I'm in awe that you played any part in it.
yeah. It was amazing. It was a
Yeah.
really beautiful one. Yeah.
Um, do you have anything coming up? Anything you'd like to plug for the listeners? Where would you like people to find you if you would like to be found?
Oh yeah, sure. You can find me at Kat Jeffery on Instagram, and I'm probably the same on TikTok, although I haven't really been posting on TikTok. I'm a voyeur, as they say. Um, what am I working on? I just finished working on Billy the Kid season 2, and I did Fargo season 5 last year. Um, aging and doing all the breakdown and die. Moving on
Incredible.
to another project coming up. So I don't know. That's you see me in the final credits on your Netflix TV show.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Grab a snapshot. Grab a screen share it
Yeah,
to Friendless. I want to see it. It's
yeah.
amazing. One last time, Kat, just thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible. I just yeah. It's conversations like this that I like. This is why I will do this show until I drop, just for the
And you
opportunity to
have
have these
to.
kinds of conversations, you know?
I've so enjoyed it. Oh my gosh. This is like this is when I read like what you do and like obviously like I love talking to you 15 years ago. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to say yes. But it's like the same. Like it's like the like high deep it's a beautiful opportunity to have
Yeah. Yeah. You're amazing. Thank you.
that.
And that's it. Thank you one more time to Kat for coming on the show. What a pleasure it was to catch up with her. I've been genuinely vibrating ever since chatting. So thank you one more time. And thank you for listening all the way to the end. I have a little bit of a favor to ask you before you go. So I have hired a producer for the show. My friend Bob is going to be stepping in and helping me develop some new content for the show and to try and kind of push some new facets of the sort of friendless ethos or ecosystem. And one of the things we're going to be offering is a membership to a sort of a deeper dive service. So there's going to be classes, there's going to be resources, there's going to be exclusive Discord access for discussions and Q&As. And I'm really curious to hear from listeners if you were to subscribe or buy a membership for Friendless, what would be some things that you would be interested in getting? This can be anything. Just throw all your ideas my way. You can get at me at social media, on Instagram, TikTok, at FriendlessPod. You can email me, friendlesspod@gmail.com. Let me know all your wild ideas. Just throw them my way. I'll consider them. I'll throw them in the pot, and in about a month or so, we're going to be launching the whole big rebrand and expansion. And so, yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. And if you've got feedback, please send it my way. In the meantime, as always, be sure to sign up for the weekly Substack, where you're getting 5 distractions every week, as well as a curated poem and a monthly playlist. That is also going to be expanding soon, so do keep your eyes open for that. But that's it for me, so I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to catch you back here next week. But I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, I'll just say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweeties.